another attack that doesn't seem like it's an attack on Americans, but really is the decimation of USAID. Now, I would expect Donald Trump, and I would applaud Donald Trump, if he was talking about reforming, reevaluating, reprioritizing USAID. But instead, it seems that he is focused on dismantling USAID. Now, it's not like nobody thinks that's a good idea. Just today, Vladimir Putin applauded President Trump for decimating and in effect calling for the abolition of USAID. Now, Vladimir Putin doesn't care about the Constitution of the United States. We should. Under that Constitution, this Congress passed into the law of the land statutes providing for USAID to operate. And then we passed statutes saying that for this or that operation, this or that amount of money should be spent. Laws of the land creating the programs, laws of the land indicating how much money should be spent on those programs. Those are laws. They're being shredded by King Donald I. So, who benefits from this? Well, three beneficiaries: China, disease, and mass migration. Let's first look at China. First, the Chinese are smart enough not to compliment Donald Trump for destroying USAID because they see an opportunity, particularly in the islands of the Pacific, islands my father risked his life for during World War II. They see in these Pacific islands small countries where just a little bit of aid can go a long way for the very few people who live there. These are strategic islands, as we learned in the 1940s. And so China sees us abandoning the world, and they come in a position to grow in world influence. And how much money are we spending here? If you look at the polling, Americans say, well, our foreign aid budget must be 25% of our federal budget, and it should be lower. It should be down to 10% of our federal budget. Our foreign aid budget is less than 1% of our federal budget. No one concerned with foreign aid has dreamt of it being 10%. It's less than 1% of our federal budget. It's less than 1/4% of our GDP. And for that, we can vie with China for influence. But there's more. There's health. A lot of USAID money is spent to deal with malaria, HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, Ebola, and bird flu. So if you have no morality, if you do not care whether the world's most powerful economic engine does anything to help the poorest of the poor in the world, you might at least take a look at the health effects. Because every time one of these communicable diseases flourishes abroad, it can come here. We saw that with HIV/AIDS. We fear that with Ebola. And every single person who gets HIV/AIDS, every single person with tuberculosis, gives the disease another little laboratory in which it might mutate and become more difficult for us to control when it does come here. So we're talking about spending money for team human versus team virus and team pathogen. How much will it cost for us to treat people if there's a new disease, a drug-resistant strain of tuberculosis, or a drug-resistant or more communicable version of HIV/AIDS? And then finally, we're all focused on the price of eggs. We're all paying an extra 50 cents for every egg at Waffle House. Bird flu is combated by USAID around the world, and every chicken that gets bird flu in a very poor country is a chance for that flu to mutate and come to the United States in strengthened form. So if you're concerned about the health of Americans and the price we pay for our groceries, USAID's efforts to control disease should matter to you. And finally, when people are faced with the worst catastrophes, with drought, with war, with famine, those are the people most likely to engage in mass migration. So even if you have no morality, even if you do not want to help the least of these with even 1/4% of the American GDP, do not take action, Mr. President, that expands the power of the Chinese Communist Party, expands the opportunity for disease around the world, and creates mass migration that will not be stopped by the wall you didn't build. Then we're told lies about USAID. We're told that $50 million was spent for condoms in Gaza. Then the president himself said $100 million. How about not one penny? Complete lie. Now, that doesn't mean we haven't spent some money in Gaza. We did provide for field hospitals in Gaza. People were dying in Gaza. We provided help. And you can argue about what our policy in Gaza should be, but not one condom. You know, there was another lie he told. That wasn't a lie. It was actually the truth. He said we spent $6 million on tourism for Egypt. It wasn't exactly on tourism, but it related to transportation. Mostly true. Except it was a program that Donald Trump established in his first term. He's saying abolish USAID because of what he did in his first term. But while we're talking about lying about how money is spent, let's focus on another lie. They told the lie that USAID had spent $8 million on subscriptions to Politico Pro, a publication. No, the entire executive branch spent $8 million. Okay, is this a woke publication? A waste of money? A subsidy for left-wing journalism and activism? Well, maybe. But Republicans in the House of Representatives last year in all their various congressional offices, just in the House, I'm not even including the Senate, spent $800,000 in subscriptions to Politico Pro, making individual decisions in over 200 offices. They decided that the subscription was necessary to run their office. And you know what? Politico Pro has a competitor, provides much of the same kinds of research, Bloomberg Government, and Republicans in the House of Representatives spent another $800,000 in 1 year. So that seems like a lot of money, especially when you realize that the executive branch is a lot bigger than Congress. If you want to visualize it, the Republicans in Congress who spent $800,000 on Politico Pro have their offices in 1.5 office buildings. Now close your eyes and think of how many office buildings the U.S. government occupies. Well, why do congressional offices and other policy-making offices spend money on these publications? Because it's a lot more efficient to get an analysis that is published and footnoted by experts than it is to hire fine staff, and I have some here, to do the separate research for every entity and every office and every congressional office. And that is a decision each member of Congress makes when they decide whether to subscribe to Bloomberg Government, Politico Pro. And that is also a decision that every doctor and medical researcher makes when they decide whether to subscribe to expensive medical journals. The fact is, it's cheaper to read an article that's specialized and detailed and more expensive than your general purpose articles. This is not a newspaper with events in my city. This is not a huge mass market publication. It is cheaper to subscribe to a specialty journal than it is to hire hundreds of people to do your own research. And that is why members of Congress subscribe to Politico Pro and spend $800,000 on it. And yet the President of the United States first lies and says it was $8 million for USAID, and then lies and says, it's some sort of subsidy to some woke liberal activist publication. I know my colleagues well. I know my Republican colleagues well. Very few of them are interested in subsidizing woke journalism.